Okay, let's do it.
Actually shorter.
I'd like to call to order, please, the work session on Monday, February 24th, 4:30. Now, to inform you, there's a regular meeting following this meeting, but I will give you a break so that, after we call the meeting to order. So, as I look around the table, we're all here tonight, and I have to tell you, this is blinking, the new microphones are blinking green. Is that the way they're supposed to be?
Yes.
All right, just want to make sure. So let's go, we have two items on the work session agenda this evening. The first item is a presentation regarding the introduction of the sewer pretreatment ordinance. Mark Siemens, Environmental Services Manager, and Linda Shapcott, Environmental Quality Supervisor, will present. And did I just murder your name, or?
Correct.
Oh,
Absolutely perfect.
good. Thank you.
Well,
You have
Madam
the
Mayor and
floor.
Council, thank you for the opportunity to present this program to you. First, I'd like to give a real big shout out to Linda, who did a tremendous job on help pulling this program together, working with our consultant over the last couple of years, all the intricacies of the pretreatment program. Linda took the lead on all of it, and she did a great job pulling this program together, so I wanted to thank her for that.
Thank you, Linda. I just wanted to interrupt you a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
I think most of the council likes to ask question as we go. Do I have that, and rather than till the end? You know, today, some spoke to me about it. The rest of you feel that same way, because otherwise they may forget the question, or they may not have said something when it was being talked about in that segment. So if you don't mind that.
Not a problem,
All right,
absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm trying to see if to get this clicker to work here. It's not. And neither is this. I'll try to, but I can't get the program to move here. Hello, wake up. There we go. And now it's nice and loud too. So what we'll do for you tonight is we're going to outline the program and present a couple of topics to you. What is Goodyear's pretreatment program? We'll describe the chronological events we got to this point. We'll discuss some of the changes in the ordinance that we're going to be presenting. What are the effects of the program? How we're going to communicate the program to the industrial users within the city of Goodyear, and then actions to be taken by the council at later dates. So what is the Goodyear program? This is just not responding. This one? There we go. Oh, let's go this way. And that way. There we go. All right. Through the technical difficulties. So what is the Goodyear pretreatment program? This program was designed to prevent the introduction of pollutants into our sewer system and the reclaimed facilities that could cause major disruptions in the treatment processes. What we're trying to prevent is those heavy chemicals that may come in and do damage to our system, because our system is a biological system, and we want to make sure that we protect it and the operators that are involved in the process. The other thing is that it will ensure a high quality water effluent that's to use for reclaim, recharge, or other beneficial uses on the outside or the outfall of the treatment plant. This program is tailored specifically from 40 CFR Section 403.3 of the Federal Clean Water Act, and adapted specifically to our current industries, and allows for growth in future industries. It's going to meet the council goal for quality of life by protecting the operators, the treatment process, and the environment, and it's identified in our environmental services strategic plan. So it's going to meet all those goals for us.
Yeah, for the audience, so it's going to be identified. Could you tell them what has been before this? Is this just a continuation of a program we've been doing, or is this an improved one? Just for the public, because after you making that statement, it does make one think that we have no process. So
Yes, ma'am. That's actually the basis of the next slide.
Okay.
Will give us a little bit of breakdown of the history of where we were and what this new ordinance, actually a revised ordinance, will ensure for us to do.
Thank you.
So since 2010, the city has worked closely with ADEQ, the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, in the development of this pretreatment program. Several things that we've done and accomplished through that process. First, we developed the local industrial pretreatment limitations, or local limits, for pollutants of concern as defined by EPA. They give us a general guideline of all the pollutants, and we have managed that to our local industries. We revised and updated the existing ordinance, currently Code 12, identified as sewer. We've created an enforcement response plan to identify, to document, and to respond to potential violators. We've created procedures within the program to actually implement that program. We've communicated the program to Goodyear's industries by meeting with each industry individually, and then we submitted a follow-up letter to those industries as identification of what our program will be. We submitted this program to ADEQ for their approval, and ADEQ did do a public notice of this program in October of 2013, and in December of 2013, the city received approval from the department for the program. So what are the changes to the ordinance? Oops, let me go this way. First and foremost, one of the things that most of the ordinance changes that are coming out in water, sewer, and others is that all definitions are now organized and consistent with city code. One of the things that we found in this ordinance was that the definitions, if you ever do a study, if you ever do a research on these things, typically definitions are right in the front, at the first chapter, the first section. Well, this ordinance had it all woven in throughout, so we pulled all those up to the front. It establishes those local limits that we talked about that are specific and now legally defensible. It creates a discharge permit application process we did not have before to comply with, typo, Senate Bill 1598. We can now identify, document, and respond to violators, which is currently not in Code 12. And it establishes the authority to approve enforcement actions and assess fines as established by 40 CFR Section 403.3 of the Clean Water Act. Wow, this is just, there we go. Talk about the effects of the program briefly. We now have those local limits approved by ADEQ on industrial and commercial discharges into the sewer system. We've established an enforcement authority for the potential violators of the pretreatment program. The program is now compliant with EPA and ADEQ under Title 40, the Clean Water Act. And we now have, the biggest effect is that it now protects the treatment plants, the operators, and the downstream environment of the reuse water.
Question.
Joanne?
So you have the ability to see who those industries or, who the ones that are violating, you're able to tell where they're coming from within the system?
Yes, ma'am. The part of the program is to actually go out and do biannual checks of the system where we can actually sample the effluent stream from these industries.
I see.
We'll be able to collect the samples and then identify if they're violating or not, and now we'll be able to enforce that action. Keep going the wrong way here. Communicating the program is probably one of it's the biggest application of this program so that we can make sure that all of our industries understand exactly what we're doing. Staff, through Linda and her folks, have already gone out and met with the Goodyear Industries. We've communicated the fact that a pretreatment program was coming, being developed, and then through site visits, and then again, that formal letter, it was a certified letter if I'm not mistaken. So every industry that we've identified has been notified. We're working with Development Services to create a new brochure for mailing that will explain the program. So it's another outreach that we're working under this program. Along with, again, with Development Services, we'll be providing more information on the city website. Our goal is to have a packet when industries come in. We can submit our portion with Sherry's packet and then be able to identify all new industries as what they're actually going to be working with. We've hired a new pretreatment inspector, and he's in our audience today. Don Spencer. Don, wave. Don's our new pretreatment
Did you
inspector.
say Don?
Don.
Welcome, Don.
Don will be tasked with conducting educational opportunities for existing and new potential users, as well as establish a routine site visit. So that twice a year visit will be Don's responsibility to go out and contact those individuals. And then involvement in the critical step of all new industry applications. That's what we'll be doing in this process. So we'll be a part of the team that evaluates any new applications that come through.
Good person. Joanne, sorry.
No offense, Don, we appreciate you being here, but was this part of our 511 employee base that we've always had? Just a question. As we look at our budget coming forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
So what are the actions going forward? we'll be asking council for adoptions of a resolution and the ordinance at the March 3 council meeting. So next week, we'll be presenting the resolutions. We're going to be asking you to adopt a resolution declaring Chapter 12A titled Sewer Pretreatment as public record and adding the permit application process to comply with Senate Bill 1598. Again, a typo, I apologize. And then we'll be asking you to adopt the ordinance by amending the city codes.
Joe?
Just a question on the pretreatment. Do you actually go on site to test the byproduct that's leaving the facility to meet certain standards before it gets into the sewer? Is that one way of doing it?
Councilman, we'll take that sample right out at the manhole leaving their site. We'll be able to go into the manhole and actually pull a sample from that.
What are the fines if, because you mentioned some enforcement, if they're not in compliance?
Councilman, the ability to do fines is one step in the process. What we'll really do is start opening communications with them first, and then identifying the fact that, we found a sample result that exceeded our local limits. We'll discuss with them, give them an opportunity. The fines that are in the ordinance that you'll be seeing as part of your packet are
Significant.
developed right from the EPA right from the EPA guidance documents. So, certain fines such as if you violate, after we've gone through our process, due diligence in that, limits, ranging up to $10,000 a day.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Those
thought
types
they
of
were
things.
significant.
They are
It would get
significant.
one's attention, and so I suppose when they see that at the closing, they're more apt to keep that in mind now that we have all the packets and things available to give to them.
Yes, ma'am, that's the intent.
Just one.
Joanne?
And, sorry, and as we're going into our priority-based budgeting, this is taking a mandated program that we will need to be having, and that's how we'll look at it within our new system, correct? Because we were looking at so many things that are these mandates that we're putting on ourselves, or these mandates, and you're saying that these are mandates through an ARS code. So, I just appreciate that. That's something that we are doing that is correct, that,
Mayor Lord and Councilmember Osborne, this is one of those identified mandated programs within the priority-based budget.
Thank you. Okay.
Joe, you had a question?
No, just to follow up on the feedback. You were in communications with the business community on your industrial. What kind of feedback were you getting as far as, the new program, et cetera?
Councilmember Pizzillo, these are large industries that understand pretreatment programs, so they had no issues with it. We were able to actually, again, strategically identify our local limits to allow them to be able to process.
Then they must have been doing the right thing.
Sherry?
Okay, when we're talking about this, I understand the Senate bill, but someone listening to this at home is going to hear pre-treatment industries, and it may sound a little scary to them. Can you explain in a nutshell, so people listening at home or who might listen to this later, in layman's terms, I guess, what this actually means? It's not going to be West Virginia where we turn on the tap and something else comes out.
That's what we're trying to protect against, Councilmember.
That's,
Exactly.
yeah, if you could explain, because some of those
I agree
terms.
with her, because, as you're talking about that, you're thinking, well, haven't they done anything all along? And,
Yeah. Right.
well, what if my kids, got in a little puddle of water, was here some things that happened? They would be very alarmed. So I guess the buildup to this is we have been doing such and such, and I gather we're even refining it now. Is that correct? Is
Mayor
that
Lord and
correct?
Councilmember Loretano, that's absolutely correct.
Okay.
What we're doing, so in layman's terms, what we're looking at is these industries that, let's say, for instance, a metal plating industry that will use the water from the potable water system as a rinse over their product. Well, their product then changes the water into some chemically enhanced byproduct. It's that byproduct we want to monitor to make sure that we're not putting mercury into our system, or nickel, or any kind of high-density metal or something like that. Because the ultimate goal of this is to protect that effluent water, because we are under permits from ADQ and the federal agencies as well on our discharges. So we want to monitor those discharges to ensure that the industries, typically not a residential, you're not going to find this in residential stuff. Typically, the industries will have a tendency of putting this stuff in the system. We want to head that off and stop. Does that get to the point?
And I guess I just wanted to make it clear that it's a safety issue. It's not that we're saying we can put more stuff in there because, as you know, all those signs appeared up at Estrella talking about effluent, and a lot of people were concerned, what is going on? Is there something bad about our water?
Right. Now, there's, Councilmember Loretano, there's nothing bad about the water. It's just protecting the wastewater system so we don't violate on our discharge permits as well. You're welcome. And with that, questions and answers.
Any other questions? No? That's very good. Thank you. I think
Thank
it
you very
was
much. I appreciate
clear.
your time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How do I get back? How do I get back?
Go with the top. Go right there. Your double, all those blocks. Oh, Joe's closer.
Thank you, Joe. All right, the next briefing is on the triggers and thresholds of new fire stations, and I think it's a question, many people have asked that before. And Paul Luisi, Fire Chief, to present. At this moment, he's handing us out some paperwork, and then we'll begin.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we're going to talk about the triggers and thresholds of when to open a new fire station. As we've seen in other departments' presentations to council on final plats, there are questions at times from the council members that wonder when it would be appropriate to open those fire stations. So we thought it would be a good idea to review with the council some of the current strategies that we use, some of the strategies we'll be looking at in the future, and then some proposed discussion for you guys tonight. Okay, so we're going to be reviewing our current guidelines, as I said, also looking at the accreditation model and what that will bring to the city as well, and then also establish some direction for future deployment of fire stations. Some of the definitions that we'll go over a little bit tonight, standards of cover. This is a guiding document that establishes response recommendations through the accreditation process. Call volume is the total number of dispatches regarding the location or the jurisdiction. Travel time is what we've talked about before in a previous presentation, the break to break. That's the en route time to on arrival at the call. The response time, according to the accreditation model, response time includes the dispatch, the turnout or the preparation, the time to get dressed for the call, the travel time, and then which equals the total response time. So that is the response time and the definition we'll be using tonight. First due is the station's area of responsibility, so whatever demographics or region or area that they serve around their station. And then Polygon is a planning tool used to identify potential fire station locations. So a little bit of a history, and I do have a break in here to ask questions as well, Mayor.
Great, thank you.
From a history standpoint, on July 14th, 2008, Mayor and Council at the time approved the final Sonoran Valley Public Safety Master Plan. The city needs to pursue a more rational approach to impending growth in order to maintain a fiscal balance, and it was really one of the big reasons why they went out and had the Sonoran Valley Public Safety Master Plan done. And it wasn't just the Sonoran Valley, it was the entire city limits that the plan covered. So again, the challenge is to where to locate stations in such a way to kind of maximize the effectiveness and the efficiencies of those stations. So they use a diamond or that polygon to help kind of locate where the best area for the station. One of the biggest concerns, as we all know, is it's not a one-size-fits-all that fits all the communities, so we have to kind of plan in the best way we can. And we have to find the characteristics of that planning area of when to put in a fire station. So one of the goals in the Sonoran Valley Public Safety Master Plan was to ensure that fire protection, EMS facilities and services are located to ensure acceptable response times. So here are the current guidelines that we use when we're looking at new developments and stations. So one of the first guidelines, if more than 35% of the homes or businesses in the new area being served are 3 to 4 miles from the fire station, and or 20 to 25% of the response times are taking longer than 8 minutes, then the minimum action would be to open a temporary station, or what they call in the plan a frontier fire station. So that's the 2-person response station, very similar to what we have in the Mobile community at this time.
Joe?
I figure this is a good place to ask the question, because one of my concerns was the 2-person crew. Can you explain to me what they can and can't do? Because it's always my understanding, it's 2 in, 2 out, so they really can't go on a fire. And when it comes to EMS, you really need more than 2 because somebody's monitoring. So explain to me the value of a 2-man crew.
The value in the 2-man crew is what we determine or call as a clock stopper. So they are getting on arrival at the address, and especially in an EMS call, whether it's chest pain, shortness of breath, they are starting treatment right then and there. They are a paramedic unit. They are paramedic capable. So they have all of the equipment that a 4-person company would have, but they're at least able to start the treatment right away and hopefully start to turn back the clock a little bit on the person if they're experiencing chest pain, shortness of breath. Those minutes are very valuable in a person's life. With regards to, as you spoke about, to a structure fire, you're right. They cannot make an attack on a structural firefight. They could make at least a first unit attempt on a wildfire, but they would have to size up the area and determine what procedures they could begin with.
Joanne?
So Paul, in the past, when we've discussed 2 or 3-man crews, one of the issues that came up was the mutual aid situation. So when you have this frontier unit, would they be on call for, they would be?
Yeah, they would be included in the automatic aid consortium, but it's noted in the dispatch criteria that they are a 2-person crew, so they would subsequently dispatch another unit with them.
Okay,
this
because
is-
always in the past, we were
Yep.
given kind of the feeling that we weren't even allowed to discuss that.
They are included in the automatic aid dispatch, but again, they will dispatch additional resources because they don't fulfill the manning requirements.
Right, I
So,
understand.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Bill?
So, obviously, coming with a little different viewpoint on that, just to be clear, not only are we sending the 2 people, but we're also sending another company of 4. So on a call that normally takes only 4 people is now getting 6 people.
Oh,
And I don't think
thank
that
you
was
for-
clear. Yeah.
No, that was
I'm
not.
sorry about that.
Okay, so if you can go back, can you go back one slide? I didn't know when to stop you. You said you had them pre-built, and
I do. yeah.
okay. So, but before we get too far down the road, you said that this Sonoran Valley Public Safety Master Plan was done for what was once called the Montage development.
Yeah, it was, yes, paid for by, yep.
Paid for,
Yes.
specifically identified for that area, that particular area down there.
But it also included the entire city, so it included to the most northern reaches of the city to the most southern reaches, it included the entire city.
Okay. And this was, I'm going to suggest was done at a different time in a different era with a different mentality.
Absolutely.
Look at it.
The growth at this time was double-digit growth in the city at the time that this study was done, and was completed just before the Great Recession.
Right.
Yes.
So much like our discussion, I guess I'm going to look to the rest of the council, much like our discussion on transportation, are we using flawed data to make our transportation decisions about buses, et cetera? I think personally I would throw a caution that we're using a study that was conducted, that was verified in 2008 by the council, but was actually conducted in 2007. So we're already talking about data that's almost 7 or 8 years old. And then Chief, is there, you had mentioned in the, as you were outlining what we've done in the past, you've not mentioned what is in the current general plan for our response time criteria?
I have not, no.
Which I believe is 6 minutes?
It's actually 4 minutes and 59 seconds.
Okay.
Is the current documented response plan that's in there. We have updated that to reflect more of a, not a timed response, but more of a general consensus or goal for the fire department to be able to place stations and have acceptable response times to meet the needs of the community.
But today,
Yes,
our
sir.
current general plan says
Yes,
5 minutes essentially.
yes.
And what you're saying is in the new general plan that's going to go to the public for a vote, it's going to have 8 and 10-minute responses?
No, it's more of a, it's more of almost similar to this goal right here, to ensure that fire protection, EMS facilities, and services are located to ensure acceptable response times. That was accepted by the general plan committee.
And we're leaving it
Yes.
without a specific number?
Correct.
Okay.
And, Councilmember, if I may, and part of that, keeping it general here, we found that we had different timelines and different documents. So the theory here in the general plan is keep it more at this level, because this is updated every 10 years as far as the general plan. That gives us an opportunity for other documents to really have specific timelines in them that could be adopted by council.
Okay, and I think my overall point was that we have a standard in place today, been voted on several times by our residents. Now we're removing that, and I don't know if we're all aware that that was coming down the pipe or not. I know I certainly wasn't until this conversation here, so, you know, we should bear that in mind in any decision we move forward.
Wally, you have a comment on that?
Oh, just in the past, and I believe you brought it up, Bill, when we discussed, time was one thing, but it was really more about the outcome. Was the life saved? Was the fire put out in a decent, you know, I mean, those were those were the things that really were the more impactful than the actual time. And so, I understand your point in the general plan. We've been saying a time, but really, it's more about the outcome of the response.
And I would absolutely agree, but if you, in the next slides that we've already gone through, we're back to hanging our decision-making on whether we construct or staff a fire station based on time again. So we're back to the time criteria, and that's why
We need, yeah, I get you.
you know, we're back to if we've got a number of calls that are outside of a geographic area in mileage, or response times are exceeded by as many as 10 minutes. So we're taking what we currently have as a 5-minute standard, and we're actually doubling it before we say we're going to permanently put a fire station out there. So, and I think we all need to be aware of that as we give direction when we finish this conversation.
Wally?
Well, are we talking about the general plan tonight? Because you've already lost me on, I know in the general plan there's not a time frame. And personally, I really don't want a time frame because they're going to hold us to it. And if we don't do it, in 10 years, who's to say we're not coming out at 3 minutes or whatever? But I was going to comment about the two-man team, like the two-man team we have in Mobile, and you said we're now sending out 6 people. I don't see us dispatching from Goodyear proper out an hour and a half to go to Mobile to help the two-man team down there. So, I mean, mutual aid kicks in, right? And they'll be the ones that are responding. But it's no different than when we respond and help Avondale, when Avondale has half of their people on vacation, and they can't go and knock down the fire till we get there with our crews. So I don't think it makes any difference. I mean, we're all helping each other, and it's not going to cost any more. But what we need to worry about is what we're going to do about Mobile.
Why don't you interject right now?
Yes.
Comment, and then I'll get back to that.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Campbell, The automatic aid would kick in, and the closest response agency would be from Maricopa.
Right.
So to assist the two-person crew, and Councilmember Stipp is correct that it would be a six-person crew. The two-person is more of a clock stopper. This is occurring right now at Fire Station 174 in Avondale, at Thomas and Dysart. They have a two-person crew that's up until their staffing comes on board in July. So 183, which is the closest automatic aid engine by station, would also be co-dispatched with them. So 174 would get there as a paramedic crew. They could, again, stop that clock until the full complement of the call gets there. But that's how the system.
I'm sure the
that's how
patient that's
system works.
lying there, or the citizen's lying there
Yes.
appreciates the fact that
Fast
they don't,
Act.
that, you know, they don't really care, we're gonna do this and that and then, all they care about is you're gonna get to me.
Right.
And so what we're looking for is you're gonna get to me.
Yes.
Okay, so we can get tied up in these numbers like crazy, but
And
in
that's the outcome.
end,
I just want life
I,
saved.
you know, I know we have averages of how we come, and I know that in my view, the fire department's much like military. You have you have a certain group, a certain standards you have to go by in certain ways, but sometimes that doesn't work. And we have to be pliable sometimes to new ideas. So I just throw that out to you. Now, who are
Well, yeah,
you? Joe?
couple. On the 2-minute that we have down in Storm Valley, at some point, I think we probably need to have a policy discussion on that particular there. But the only reason why I ask about the 2 is, it's always my understanding, and again, I don't have the expertise that you do, is that it really takes 4 when you're looking at heart and whatever, because you don't have the full people around. I guess my question, if it was only 2, are you creating a liability as a result of that, because you don't have all 4 there? You know, I'm just throwing this out, and I don't know what the answer
Talking
to that.
about the technology, okay, because we've increased technology for those 2 individuals. So what used to take more at the first doesn't now, because we do have those resources. So can you kind of elaborate?
Those resources are available for them. Again, they have the same equipment that a 4-person company up here would have. But you're correct. I mean, there is what we call the pit crew mentality, that everybody has a job. But as the clock stoppers, as that 2-person ALS crew, they are able to initiate treatment, which, you know, in many events could be life-saving for that patient. Again, as Councilmember Stipp alluded to, that 4-person company is coming to help. So, you know, but the moments and the minutes that that 2-person crew saves for that community is very vital.
Well, so the time also, it would seem to me that they've stabilized the patient.
Yeah, absolutely,
I want to talk about
yes.
fire, because fire is totally different to me. They stabilize them. So really, the time that the other 4-man unit is there is not extended like it was before. So they're kind of
Correct.
coming up, picking up, and they go. Is that pretty clear?
That is correct.
Okay.
And just a quick follow-up.
Joe?
We're talking about outcomes. I know time, but to me, personnel and time
Absolutely.
equals outcome.
Yeah,
If you don't get there in time, especially in a heart attack or whatever, your outcome's not going to be very well.
agreed.
Can we go on to the next? Is okay,
I'm
everybody?
good.
All right, go ahead.
So again, we're reviewing goals that we currently have in place and that we're using now, and again, felt like it was important to bring to council the steps that we go through when determining stations right now. So the second guideline is if more than 50% of the structures are 5 miles or more from the station and/or 30% of the response times exceed 10 minutes, then a new permanent fire station would be required. And again, at that permanent station, that's when staffing would go to 4 persons. So this is just, again, just a quick summary of what we just talked about, just to give you something to look at. At this point, I would ask for if there are any additional questions with regards to this trigger and threshold.
Jerry?
Yes.
Sherry?
When we're talking about 50% or 35, would that be like the total build-out of that
Yes.
plat or that
Yeah.
area?
Yep.
Okay, so when
ma'am.
50% of that would be outside that area is what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Joanne?
So, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with this, and this does play into the way we're setting the new impact fees and the new everything that we're going to discuss later tonight. That's all works together in
Yes.
this? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, based on that. Okay,
Hang on.
I'm sorry.
Bill?
So we're saying if the response times, if 20 to 25% of the response times are longer than 8 minutes, we need to put in a temporary station.
Correct.
The temporary station is up. Now, 30% of the calls that we're now responding to, the response time exceeds 10 minutes.
Yes.
So we've put in a measure, or a stopper, if you will, to try to reduce that 25% of the calls to 8 minutes. And that clearly isn't working if we go to 30, we increase by 5% of the calls and we actually add 2 more minutes to the response time.
Yes.
Before we consider a 4-person company.
Correct.
Intuitively, that doesn't add, mathematically, it just doesn't add up to me. Have I missed something on that? We're extending the time before we say we need to move a station closer. It would seem to me if we put a measure in, or a device in place to shorten that, and it still doesn't meet it, that perhaps we need to think about actually building a station as opposed to this temporary thing. Have I missed?
No, you're right on the mark with that one. Again, this was the author's take and his subject matter expertise that was put into the development of this triggering threshold. Again, it was felt like an opportunity tonight to come to the council to explain these are what criteria we're using currently when we have to decide if we're going to put a new station. It was to.
And we did talk about, and we have, since I've been on this council, about the cost of fire stations.
Yes.
And having too many built, and because the cost of it all. And so it all reflects back, of course, to the citizens. They're paying for this, right? Through their taxation. So I guess that's kind of sort of a dilemma. You want to be not overly exuberant, but you want to save lives and be there for them. So I think it's a really finite, it's a tightrope to walk, and I think it looks to me like you're trying to solve something, and I agree. When I looked at that number, I went, I'm not sure if that makes sense to me. Joe?
Well, let me ask you, what's the majority of the calls now?
Right now, 72% of them are EMS.
Okay. EMS breakdown, are they heart, are they, what percentage would be life-threatening of those 72%?
About 30 to 34% of those would be in the higher category, and probably around 15 to 20% of those 30% would be of the life-threatening cardiac arrest, drownings type calls.
What happens if you get a call for a cardiac arrest and it takes you 10 minutes to get there?
There's certainly
Not good, right?
not good, unfavorable outcomes.
Sharon?
No. Yeah.
Yeah, I share the vice mayor's concerns when we're talking about, this is, you don't get a second chance to make some of these calls. It's a one-shot only. The numbers, I just want to make sure I'm understanding, because we've got a lot of percentages here. The 30% of the response time exceeds 10 minutes. Is that getting the 2 men there, or is that getting the full now 6-man contingent there?
That would be the 2-person, the first unit on
Okay, so that's the
arrival.
first
Yes.
response getting
Yep.
there, okay.
All right, okay, go ahead.
So in 2007, Matrix and the Public Safety Citizens Advisory also looked at a goal for public safety departments to provide an equivalent level of police, fire, and emergency medical service for all residents of Goodyear. And at that point, the goal was, by policy, established on 4 minutes and 59 seconds, 90% of the time. And again, as Councilmember Stipp and Councilmember Campbell alluded to, this is in the general plan. And then it was 7 minutes and 59 seconds for ladder company and also for battalion chief to arrive. This goal ensures fire protection, incident commanders, and EMS facilities are located to ensure acceptable response times. This goal. I also wanted to talk about how are other cities looking at this. Talking with the city of Scottsdale and their growth. They use the standards of cover. And again, I talked about that earlier in the definitions. It is a way to evaluate the city and to see where the best locations are for fire stations, but also it maximizes the philosophy of the council on what the standards of coverage need to be within that city. So again, it's a rational, systematic way of looking at the best service provided by the emergency service agency. One of the criteria that the city of Scottsdale has adopted is a minimum of 500 calls outside of a 4-minute response polygon would require or necessitate the opening of a brand-new station. Again, city of Scottsdale, this is what they have adopted. And they've pulled this out of Managing Fire and Emergency Services, which was published by the ICMA and updated in 2012. So this is based off their slowest fire station, their number of 500, and that would be the requirement for them to open a new state. Again, city of Scottsdale's requirements.
Any other questions?
I was going to ask,
I'm sorry.
how many fire stations, does Scottsdale have 5?
Oh, no, ma'am. They're, at this point, I
Nine?
think they're 14.
Oh, 14?
Yeah, they're growing to 14, yes.
Okay.
Sherry?
Again, I'm just trying to understand your numbers, make sure I'm understanding this. When we're talking 500 calls, what period? Would that be in a year period?
In a year, I'm
In a
sorry,
year, okay.
annually, yes.
No, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to
Yep.
understand because we've got a lot
That's a
of
good
numbers
point.
here.
That's a very good point.
Go ahead.
The Center for Public Safety Excellence, that's the CPSE, they have 4 measures of performance. They use emergency workload or calls for service. They have a commit time, dispatch to when the unit is available. So from the time they are dispatched to when they become available for calls. Availability, the percent of time the unit is available to handle those calls in their first due. And then the reliability, how many times are they meeting that 90% goal? These are the measures that they recommend and can be used to evaluate system performance and also unit performance. The trigger that I'm proposing tonight, at least for discussion, and again, the council in 2008, like Councilmember Stipp said, had adopted that trigger and threshold. But to give you an approach that may work for today until we get the accreditation done, consideration for council would be the total response time is greater than 8 minutes, 30% of the time, and, so this is the and, if the proposed development is greater than 6 miles away from the current station, and if more than 500 calls annually for emergency service exceed that 8 minutes. So there's the 8 minutes, 30% of the time. That's our proposal for discussion for tonight, for council members. Try to keep the presentation short for more discussion.
Joe?
So by putting an and in there, all 3 have to be met before, correct?
Yes, yes.
Second thing is, that's why I guess I'm a big proponent of, as we grow smart and try infill. I mean, as you infill, you'll be able to postpone, at least time-wise, more stations as you get farther out, because the response time is going to increase as they start building. So from a growth smart perspective, I would like to see us try to encourage more infill, at least where the stations are, so we help minimize this. Because I know from a medical standpoint, the farther out you go,
Yes.
the less chances of survival, especially if you have a really serious condition there.
I agree with Joe, but there's lots of other circumstances that prevents us from doing a lot of infill.
I know,
We have
but
developers who won't move the land. So then we get other people that, we have many developments coming back online that went down during the economy was so low. So they're coming back online, so, and they want to build, and so it's just really frustrating, because that is the land that they can build on. Otherwise, we can't say to them, hey, Joe, you can come over, but buy this plot of land for us, please, because we want to keep that. I agree with the philosophy of it, don't get me wrong. And it would just be great if we could just edge it out little bit by little bit, but that's not how reality is in the development world. You're right, but it's just not realistic, so we're forced to deal with this.
I understand, but if they're driving our costs, remember what we used to say, development pays for itself, so,
Well, so does
I
density.
know, so.
And so does progress. And every day I hear people say they want this, and they want that, and they want this. Well, they don't come until we get the density. So it's caught you in between this. Joanne?
And you mentioned accreditation.
Yes.
So this proposal that you have goes in line with the way some of that is?
It is, it would be almost an interim until the accreditation occurs, until we develop that standards of cover. So but I think it's a little more updated and a little more
It's not going to hurt you. in other
realistic for
words, but-
council to consider.
Not that that's the main, not that that's the focus is accreditation, but at the
No.
same time, you know, I'm just looking at, I know that you're striving for that, and obviously, those policies for accreditation are going to make sense.
Yes.
And, but I also know that's gonna be at least a year or more
More.
before you'll have that.
Yes.
So, okay, I'm just asking.
But just
how
for
this
the
goes.
public, because sometimes they're not reading the papers and not keeping up, what's the importance of us getting this accreditation? Just
Well, I
quickly
think
in
one
a
of,
couple.
I think one of the biggest pieces with accreditation is, you know, balancing your practices, your policies, your procedures against best practice in the world, really, because the accreditation looks worldwide. So it's having outside peers come in and evaluate you against the best practice. So that is, you know, it stands up on its own. It says that you've made best practice, or you're striving towards best practice in the industry. And I think that's what the community wants to hear.
And that end result brings more confidence in the
Absolutely.
public.
Yes.
And it shows that you are meeting the criteria
Right.
that the other cities are meeting.
Correct.
So they can move from one city to the other and feel safe.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, Sherilyn, let me get her on this side first.
Well, I would just kind of comment is that the configuration of our city, one size is not going to fit all.
Yes.
And that's why they have to, is it not why they now have to come to a city to see what you're doing and what you have to deal with?
Right.
I mean, because they can't judge Goodyear versus, well, even say Avondale. I mean, Avondale is 35 square miles.
Yes.
In kind of a
For 190.
compact area.
190 is a lot different than that, so.
And it's very, very, very long, which is going to seriously impact where the fire stations would need to be. That,
Correct. Yes, it would be a unique view at us.
Who on this side had a question?
I did-
Sherry?
How many calls do we have in a year? Because it says 500 calls annually.
Right now, our calls for service, we're at about 6,900
Okay.
in, per year, calls of service. Now, to just give you an example, Fire Station 182 right now is almost at 600 calls.
Just
year.
themselves.
Yeah, just themselves. And versus Fire Station 183, which is a community park, is 1,600, almost 1,700 calls.
Okay.
And, you know, the two map, I'm sorry, Councilmember Stepp, the two maps that I have handed out to you kind of shows the areas that, where the plating is starting to occur. So you can kind of see, those are calls that are occurring. The top one that you have is west of Cotton, and then all the way out to the city boundary on Perryville. And, you know, in that area, you can see that those calls are starting to add up. And so the proposed fire station that we've talked about, that is in the CIP and the IIP, is at Citrus and Harrison, just south of the I-10. So currently, this fire station, these calls are being serviced out of the fire stations at Yuma and Saraville. So having a station closer obviously would help with the response times. But we've seen about a 21% increase in calls in calendar year from 2012 to 2013 in this shaded area. And then the second map is the province Cantamia area, which is south of Fire Station 182. And again, we've seen about a 7% increase in call volume down there.
7 or
7%, yeah, 7, number 7.
I guess, yeah, that kind of is one of my questions is, because obviously with these type of calls, you only get the one shot to get it right. I mean, we can't.
Yes.
If we find, let's say we go with these proposed triggers and then we just have that extreme growth again. I mean, it's okay within the accreditation. That's something we can come back and look at and say, oh,
Yes.
well, we're growing. You can come back to us and say, we need one before these triggers. We have these other issues.
Yeah, and, you know, quite honestly, the Sonoran Valley Master Plan has kind of plugged in acceptable sites for fire stations around the city. But you're correct, accreditation, they would come back out every 5 years to reaccredit you. And so there's this constant evaluation on a yearly basis internally, and also submitting that document externally as well for review.
Sorry, Bill?
Sherlyn, you want to go ahead?
I
Sherrilyn,
just
I'm
had,
sorry, I didn't know you weren't done.
Well, I just had I had a question, and that is, what kind of a volume of calls are we getting with the two-man unit and mobile?
Currently, within just the mobile community, they are running 27 calls for service down there per year. 7. On the automatic aid, they are running 72. So that is when they're getting picked up as the closest unit by GPS. And they are, again, that clock stopper, so 72. So about what's less, about 30% of those are just for the Mobile community that they're responding to.
Bill?
Okay, this wasn't my original question, but, so we're actually stopping the clock for Maricopa on 72 of those calls.
In some of those calls, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
No, it would be on 50,
72 minus the 27?
yeah.
Okay, so that's 72
Total,
total.
yes, total.
Oh,
I'm
not
sorry.
99, okay.
No, 72 total, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Thank you.
but either way, those 40-something or 50, whatever that number
Yeah.
is. We're actually doing Maricopa a favor by
Yes.
clock stopping for them.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's even better. All right, so my question goes to the proposed trigger of 6 miles.
Yes.
Using that number as a criteria, ISO has us at 5 miles
Yes.
from the fire station.
Yeah.
The previous information we had was 5 miles, but you
Yes.
pushed it out a mile.
Yeah,
Sort of rationalized.
we looked back through the accreditation model and tried to find, is there a best practice as far as the polygon and the mileage from the station? And a lot of the responses we got back from accreditation personnel was the city can define its response polygon. Councilmember Stipp is correct that ISO, the insurance rating company, does have us at a 5-minute polygon, or a 5-mile polygon. But there are also other ways to look at this, and this was more of a suggestion for consideration by the council members. Again, nothing set in stone, just for some discussion for you guys as well.
So, this is the proposed trigger, and
Yes.
it's 3 points.
Yes.
8-minute response time, 6 miles away, or 500 calls. But if there's, the 6 miles doesn't have a foundation in anything.
No, it doesn't. No, it would be to redefine that polygon and make those 6 miles throughout the city. Yes.
So if we were to have that discussion, we could look at 5 miles to keep it consistent with the
absolutely.
Insurance Services Organization. with
Correct.
All the other
Yes.
national criteria that's out there.
Yes. Absolutely.
Any other questions? All right,
That's actually the end of my presentation, Madam Mayor.
all right.
Stand for any other
Are we supposed to have a
additional
takeaway
questions.
tonight?
Are you supposed to have a takeaway now? I think tonight was just a discussion. Is that correct?
Did you guys need a takeaway?
Yeah, when's it coming back?
We would love any direction that we could get, but, certainly, we can bring this back for more discussion at a later time if you prefer.
So, quick questions. So on Bill's point, if 2 of the 3 are taking place, and especially if it's less than 6 miles, we would still look at that as highly important, rather than just a...
No, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Because that seems far more important than
Yes.
having to hit that third. It's got to be more than 6 miles
Right.
away.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, it gives, I think, council a little bit more room for discussion
Thank you.
on this. I also have another map. I'm not sure if it relates or has benefit to the council at this time, but it just shows our current areas of response. I can put
Why
up
don't
on
you put it
Elmo.
on Elmo?
Yeah.
Why don't you just put it up on Elmo? That'd be great.
Do we have Elmo?
Look at that, first time using Elmo.
Oh.
So that's our current map
Oh, it's up
that we
there.
have. I also have it here.
Oh, okay.
I don't know which one's better.
Here's better.
That's our current coverage area by all of our stations that we have right now. So the top 2 are Fire Station 183 and 185. The bottom 2 are Fire Station 181 and 184. And then the one in the green is 182, the Estrella community. Couldn't fit 187 on here.
Too much spacing. Understand.
So this is based on a 5-minute response.
Okay, that Matt brought a
Response
question
polygon.
from Bill. Bill?
Okay, so it just, we will tend, I think, as a legislative body, as a policy body, to say, here's the criteria, given the chief direction, and off we're going to go. And we're never going to look back at it, theoretically. And staff is going to, correct me if I'm wrong, rely very heavily on what we decide and what direction we give tonight. So if we have this, you're shaking your head no.
We're not going to do direction tonight, are we? We're not
They're
voting
asking
on
for a
something.
they're asking for a takeaway tonight. Do we have
They're asking for a general
some
consensus.
general
of this.
consensus or a
That's what
takeaway
they're
of,
asking for.
does this look like good criteria to move forward?
Can we change our mind if we say okay tonight and change it? I mean, we don't know how we're going to grow.
Correct, but what we decide tonight is going to be what we decide to do when the issue comes up tomorrow or next week or next month. We've already decided, and that's, the staff's going to take away, and they're going to walk out of this room with theoretical marching orders. And we won't change our minds until something happens.
I'd like Brian, the city manager, to speak. Brian?
That's not a good sign.
That's probably not. Specifically, what we're looking at is getting a sense from council tonight. We're talking a lot of facts and details that were pointed out. What we would like to do is, I would say a couple of things. One is do the proposed triggers make sense? I mean, one is, I think I'm in stereo now. One is getting a good understanding of where we're at today with the current Sonoran Valley study that was done. And that was gone through. But the other, I think, more importantly, whatever triggers we have will be very important as we look at development when it comes in. And that is how it really, if you were to put it in, okay, how does this fit into the whole big picture of development? These are the criteria that would be assessed or evaluated when new projects come into the city, especially residential development. The question I would have of council, because this is the first time you've seen this, some of the information may not quite, it's a little harder to grasp if you're, if you're a non-fire person.
Not an ex-fire person.
And or an ex-fire person, maybe a little harder to grasp. So what we would like to do is, if generally some of these make sense, we're asking for direction, but the other is, where would you like more specific information or background? So we can get to that point where we have these triggers that are established, so we can use those in the development processes. And then I guess one last point is the general plan committee, and just, again, what's in the current general plan does have timelines in it. Back to a point that was made earlier, triggers are going to need to be more flexible. Instead of every 10 years look at those. At the same time, it's something you do not want to change every couple of years, because then that keeps the development community either guessing, or you come back at them and then you're putting what seems to be surprises on them, which is not a good scenario either. So what we're looking tonight for is any direction that you have, both in terms of what's in front of you. Where would you like more information? Where do you need more background information to really better understand this? That's where we're at tonight. We would like to be back in front of council, in the next couple of months? Is that what we're looking at? Sure. Before we really start up our development, especially the residential side again, which will be coming right down the pipe for us.
Well, as I look at this, well, I'm not going to look at it right now. Joe?
I just thought of something with the comments of the city manager. Is it possible?
Public wonders what we're doing that's listening. We have new microphones, and this is the first night we've gotten them, and so somewhat of an experiment here, but they seem to be working most of the time.
city manager mentioned about, especially residential when it comes on board, to get an idea of how this is going to impact, okay? It keeps flickering on and off. But anyway, the question I have is, based on historicals, can you somewhat predict, based on the percentage of the housing calls? I mean, can you give us a good estimate when new development comes in, if they're planning on doing a certain amount of housing development over a period of time? What that may be impacting, because the triggers seem fair to me,
Yeah.
okay?
Yes, we can. We on our FireView software, we can do hotspot indicators. And we can look at that as frequently as a weekly basis to monthly, yearly. Our plan is to look on a quarterly basis to kind of review the calls. You know, the map that you see is an example of the hotspot indicator that we could run on that. And like I said, you know, in one calendar year, we saw a 21% increase. So we're watching that, but we're also looking at when the development, the final plat comes in or for our review, we're looking at, you know, where is it? What's the closest station? How far away is it? And, you know, currently we are using that Sonoran Valley Public Safety Master Plan as our guideline or as our trigger. So when someone were called up to or asked about response times or concerns, that's the basis that we're using right now. So, you know, for discussion tonight, obviously, and possibly for direction or consensus is, you know, how do you want us to proceed in the future? Is this acceptable for council now for us to use the guidelines that were established in 2008?
Headline, Sherry?
I agree with the guidelines. The only thing is like, I don't know if the wording, and I don't want to nitpick the wording, but or I just don't want it to be like all three need to come forward, or if that's just, then your discretion, you say, hey, I've noticed only number 3 is happening, but it's a concern, then you bring it back to us, or I'm
Yeah.
not sure how that works.
Yeah, I could certainly do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Molly?
Well, I'm concerned about us still using the final plan from 2008. I think
Okay.
we need to revisit it. It's a different day, and it's a different dynamic. Everything's different, and I really don't want us to keep going forward using a plan from 2008 that makes no sense. It might make a little sense, but not as much now as it did then, and I think we need to redo it.
I have a question on the studies, because studies cost money, they take time. Okay, so we did that study. We were growing 16%.
Yes.
When that study was done. Now we have dropped the growth. We're not growing 16%.
No, ma'am.
So now we're going to do a study on a lower demand than we had before. So to be judicial with our funds, and I'm looking at what you're doing to be accreditation is lots of information, United States-wide,
Yes.
okay, of communities that are our size. Where the argument began, since I've been on since 2005, plainly people said, you just are going to build fire stations to keep more firemen working, right? Do you remember that time frame that they were discussing that? We're building something we don't need. We got to buy an engine, you know, we got to pay for this, we got to pay for that, and with the new fees, how much are we going to pay now? Quite a bit. So we have to be smart in what we do. So because it doesn't sound quite right to us, I mean, I want to have a clear explanation. But they're the experts. Now, Bill gets on it because Bill was there. So I can see these two going back and forth. The public, they want to be safe. They want you to get there on time.
Yes.
I mean, there's some basic things they want. And so we have to do what's affordable and what is necessary. If this old study meets the number of people and the number of where, then, you know, I say you have to be the one, and the city managers, to help us come along with that decision-making. Brian?
And, you know, Mayor, to that point, a couple of things. One is council has seen what we call the infrastructure improvement plan. So that is our approach to impact fees or development fees, however you want to label those. We actually have 2 fire stations that are in there that will be, the capital for those will be paid for by new residents coming in when they pull a permit, or when the contractor pulls a permit, the home builder, to build that property. As those dollars come in, we will have a portion of that that goes for fire. We are looking at 2 fire stations in the next 10 years. So arguably, you could say we'll amass enough dollars that come in from those revenues, one 5 years from now, and then the other perhaps 10 years from now. As we look our current growth rate, no, we are not anywhere near double digits. We're 4% round growth right now, so it has slowed down considerably.
We're closer to the past study than we are to advanced study. That's what,
Yeah, we are, because when this other study was done, that was back as Chief Louisi pointed out, we were 16% average annual growth rates at that point. So we're markedly less than that. So we will be building stations. They are planned. This is really what do we do for those times where development comes in faster than we're able to construct and then operate those fire stations.
Joanne?
Yeah, I am in agreement with Sherry on the fact that the language of this, and is
confusing.
well, yes, and I would much rather be given a heads up that 2 of the criteria are hitting the point and
Absolutely.
keeping us in the loop on
Yeah.
that. I think if we hit those 3, we've gone past our time frame of.
I agree with
Sorry for
Joanne, it
that,
was very confusing, and I think that we pointed that out.
Okay.
Somebody over here, anybody else? Bill?
I agree, and that was one of the things that I was going to suggest. And I don't think tonight there's been any disagreement between what I've said and what the chief has said.
No, but you have brought up more points that are not quite understandable to us, and when you do that, I'm glad, don't get me wrong, I've always told you it's great to have somebody that knows this information on board, but it just puts question in our mind, and sometimes that creates a little insecurity here of our, it produces that, and so until you guys can work this out so that the conversation kind of matches to how the general feel at the dais is, that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I appreciate your comments, Bill, that's what you're here for, and the citizens appreciate that, so do not worry about that.
You know, I think one of the things that we all may feel better about with this, because we've removed the ands, I look at more than 500 calls annually that exceed 8 minutes.
Okay.
I would, just for council's benefit,
Yeah.
there was a long time before the station at Estrella Mountain Ranch even ran 500 calls.
Right.
So if you think about having that area with that number of residents who just so happen to not be calling 911 without a fire station, because we would never hit the criteria. We would never hit this criteria in that location. But to think we would have a community that size without a fire station, I think we'd all be, you know, it would be absurd. So there's got to be some balance in that to make sure that we're paying attention to the geography of it as well.
Sure.
And I don't know if that becomes a trigger or if that becomes an asterisk or something, but we cannot ever lose sight of that. Well, yeah, the and/ors, but even if you had this whole scenario, you'd almost never hit any of the criteria. So it just, I think as you develop the rest of it, make sure that we've thought about that aspect of it.
Okay.
Is it possible for us to have an area that we couldn't hit the criteria, yet we would absolutely recommend a station be at? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. In my mind, which sometimes doesn't resonate clearly, is that we also have to look at the risk analysis of that neighborhood. So if, you know, we're building a dynamite plant, not that we are, but if we're building a dynamite plant, we may want to
I'm
look
glad
at.
you said that.
Yes.
Thank you.
We may want to look at that, yes, ma'am. We may want to look at that risk analysis.
Yeah.
Obviously, the hazards that are within that area need to be evaluated. And we do that anyways. I mean, that's part of our evaluation tool
Right.
currently.
And that does go into play with, I mean, Estrella Mountain Ranch was in a sense remote because really there was no other mutual aid around. And
Yep.
so, you know, north of the mountain, that's not going to be the case necessarily, but, you know, I understand where you're coming from there.
I'm sorry, Joe?
No, just to follow what Bill had mentioned, Mobile, if for some reason, some developer goes down there and puts in 1,000 homes.
Well, lots of, That's the answer right there.
Well, that's what Bill was mentioning, you gotta, but I mean, I'm just saying, you gotta look at it.
Do you think, I just might guess, so if we agreed on some of these, are you saying that if that happened, they would not be able to have the right to come back to us and say, hey, listen, we've hit this point, and we have to get a fire station? So I'm cloudy on that. Because I just can't, isn't there, I mean, that's their job. When they do that, are you saying that if you don't have exactly what it is, and you gotta have a crystal ball to do that, we don't have that, and then you're saying they can't come, I mean, that's where I'm out of the loop here.
Right, I'm not saying that at all, and
Okay.
certainly I would look at the city manager and everybody else on staff who would go, well, we would never consider that. 3 years down the road, when this council is entirely different, and we're all much grayer, and we've all forgotten, it would be nice to have, I know you'll never gray, but it would be nice that we've at least, when we look at this little bit of criteria, that there's that other reminder that's in it. Because if you look back, we're talking about today, basing our decisions today on criteria from 2008. So advance 7 years from now, when none of us are here on this council.
Thank you.
Yeah. We don't want them basing their decisions on that either.
But is there something that we can do saying that in the document that says on a certain, I mean,
I think Paul's smart enough to figure that out.
That,
Yeah, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, the intent is this is the interim step for accreditation.
I'm fine with it.
So with accreditation, you'd have the document, the guiding principle, the guiding analysis of the city,
And so will the future firemen.
And also the
Yes,
triggers.
and the department heads. Okay. So everybody has the information they need
Yes.
to come in to the future councils and be able to present it,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And Mayor, I would add, if something happened where a whole bunch of houses popped out of the sky in the Mobile area, rest assured that there would have to be some type of development agreements with the developer, not only for public safety, as was originally looked at in Montage, but also water, wastewater. So these are things that developer would be required to bring forward before we are financially ready to, and that would be the spirit of the development agreements that you would have for those exceptions, and that would be a major exception.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Sherry?
On Brian's point, I think that's what we're all saying, is just have enough flexibility in there
Yes.
for the staff to come forward. Obviously, people don't get development permits without the city knowing it, so we kind of get a heads up what's getting sold, where it's coming. So if you say, oh, well, there's a bunch of houses, you'll come back to us.
Yes.
Hopefully you still in 7 years. Bill's checking us all out, though.
Yes.
Okay? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, what we're going to do now, it says information items, we're not going to take those now. We're going to adjourn this meeting, and we're going to start the regular meeting now. And then, at one point that you want, can you kind of say, hey, I need a break, or do you just want to put a time that you want your break?
You want to break it down?
Because it says here, the regular meeting immediately follows the work session. So I can call the meeting and then take a break, or not?
You don't need to call the meeting, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
You don't need to call the meeting, just adjourn this meeting, and when you're ready to start.
Oh, well, that's not what it said here, but I'll be happy to do that, yes. Okay, so 10 minutes, well, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, you have 10 minutes, all right? Meeting adjourned.
Do I hear 20?
What's happening is, this thing's on green, it's going, here's the
I'm testing the mic that's by the podium. Can you hear me? Okay, is it pretty clear? Is it gurgly?
I was on one side of the float.
So I'll just keep talking right here. Do you want me to go and test other mics in the meantime? Okay, why don't I do that?
So I think when I pulled it out the last time, it was less than one. But anyway, there was one side of the street where the deer, yeah, you have a full block.
Sherry's, can you hear me in this one? It sounds fine, no gargling, no nothing?
Do you know, I met Santana in New Orleans in the elevator at the Sheraton when I was there for a while.
Can you hear me? Pretty clear? It's not gargly. Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. Council, Goodyear, testing, Goodyear, council, Goodyear, testing, 1, 2, 3, Goodyear, testing, council.
You're right on the rail.
All right, now I'm at Joanne Osborne's. So can you hear it? Okay, I'm gonna try to mute my cell phone so that you'd only hear me through the speakers. Okay, all right. And it's not gargly. We've got aerial photo exhibit, preliminary plat, exhibits, Estrella 1237 is sounding fine.
Yeah, so I went on the street right next to my left, and there's Alice sitting there. Oh. So I actually have an associate next to him for secretary. And they talk golf all the time. So I don't know your music. I like golf. I said, you do. And I can tell you, it's very good. It's not a nice looking man.
I just turned it on. Aerial photo exhibit, EMR, the 12 parcels.
Yeah, he lives in West Arcadia High School.
Is it loud?
As did Wonder Woman, Linda.
Talking loud. I'm talking in normal voice. Yeah. So it's aerial photo exhibit EMR, the 12 parcels pre-plat, case number 135000006, Estrella preliminary plat. Okay.
Is this an oven?
Bill's gonna share a mic.
Introduce myself. Okay.
Estrella, case number. Zero, 0006, aerial photo exhibit. What's that?
Close enough. Yeah, I caught the trunk lid on the way out. I go, I think there's a monkey.
You're not hearing anything? Hearing any gurgling? Photo exhibit EMR, the 12 parcels, pre-plat, case number 135000006, City of Goodyear, Estrella, aerial photo exhibit. You can hear it all fine? Okay, but there's only one mic for Joe, Sherry, and Bill. Is that right? What's that? His is on his lapel. Okay. Oh, Bill's
Thanks for being part of our consulting team that's going to walk us through great things for the Zeitgeist.
You still hear it? This would be Bill's. This one would be the one that was giving us the most problems, that started it out. But you can hear it fine. Councilmember Sherry, no gargling. Councilmember Sherry Loretano, aerial photo exhibit. It's coming through clear. No. Is it coming through clear or any gurgling?
You know you're in business. Yes, you do. And it's what, where we have a lot of flexibility in the marketplace. How much is administrative versus legislative? Yeah.